Welcome to Crossover Commander, where we show you how to cross over your favorite pop culture characters through the blind eternities so they can command your deck with style. If you really enjoy what you see here today and would like to see this channel grow, check us out on TikTok and Patreon. The links will be in the description section down below. It looks like this portal is stabilizing, so let's get on with this show. The One Ring has been found. Lord Sauron now takes his true form and musters his dark armies of orcs and men and Nazgul to crush his foes. Lord Sauron can be summoned to the battlefield. For one, a white and a black. He is indestructible. And as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, he is not a creature. And whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless a target opponent pays 3 life. If Sauron's will is followed without delay, this deck can win by turn 4. If a setback occurs, it can win by turn 12. Sauron relies on his powerful dark magics to keep his servants in the fight, and this grants him an unstoppable army. Sauron, Lord of Barad-dûr, claims victory through his overwhelming advantage through a combination of cards. This is a crossover-themed build, however, Lord Sauron demands a great tribute in order to lend us his power, so this deck is not made on a budget. Before we get started with any of this deck, I have to first shout out a friend of mine on TikTok, AlexMan037. He made this custom soul ring for me in the fashion of the One Ring, and this episode is thanks to him. He's a fantastic guy. You should go find him if you haven't seen him already. We are starting off this deck with 2 pretty expensive cards. We've got Cabal Coffers and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. They combo together to make you a bunch of black mana. Then we have Cabal Stronghold, a kind of weaker version of Cabal Coffers, but it still gets you a lot of black mana. And then we have Memorial to Folly, enters tapped, and you can sacrifice it later on to bring back a card from your graveyard to your hand. And then we have Godless Shrine, Marsh Flats, Tainted Field, Temple of Silent Clearing, Shattered Sanctum, Orzhov Basilica, Isolated Chapel, Caves of Koilos, Shambling Vent, Command Tower, Temple of the False God, Myriad Landscape, Treasure Vault, Throne of the High City, Reliquary Tower, and to round it off, 9 Swamps and 5 Plains. And we have our One Ring, our Helm of Awakening. For 2 mana, it makes all spells cost 1 generic mana less to play. We have an Orzhov Signet for 2 generic. You can pay 1 and tap it for a white and a black. We have a Replicating Ring for 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a night counter on it. At the end of 8 counters, you get to make 8 more colorless snow artifact replicated rings that all tap and do it over and over again. Can get us a lot of mana if the game goes long. Then we have Ashnod's Altar for 3 mana, sacrifice a creature, add 2 generic mana to your mana pool. We have Altar of the Pantheon for 3 mana. Your devotion to each color and each combination of colors is increased by 1. And then if you tap it to add a mana and you control a god, which we will, you gain a life. And then Bantu's Monument for 3 generic mana. Black creature spells you cast cost 1 less, and whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. All but 3 of our creatures are going to be black, so this is going to help us out a lot. Then we have Smothering Tithe for 3 and a white. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token that can tap for mana. And then Revel in Riches combos very nicely with Smothering Tithe for 4 and a black. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasure tokens, you win the game. And then Black Market for 3 and 2 black. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add a black for each charge counter on Black Market. Lord Sauron is no stranger to searching for what he wants. So we run Vampiric Tutor for a black, search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. You lose 2 life. And Profane Tutor has Suspend for 2 for 1 and a black. Search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle. And then Diabolic Tutor for 2 and 2 black. Search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. And Peer into the Abyss for 4 and 3 black. Target player draws cards equal to half of the number of cards in their library, and then loses half of their life, rounded up each time. There need not be any interruption to Lord Sauron's plans. So we run Altar of the Brood for 1 generic mana. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Then we run Altar of Dementia for 2 generic. Sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power on top of their library into the graveyard. Blind Obedience for 1 and a white. It has Extort. And artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And then Ghostly Prison for 2 and a white. Creatures can't attack you unless their control plays 2 generic mana for each creature they control that's attacking you. Blanket of Night for 1 and 2 black is an enchantment that says each mana-producing land is a swamp in addition to its normal land type. This will help us with Cabal Coffers and the Magus of the Coffers that comes later in this deck. Then we have Desecrated Tomb for 3 generic mana. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. And then Polluted Bonds for 3 and 2 black. Whenever a land comes into play under an opponent's control, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. It's a good thing in this deck to keep our life total high and our enemies low so we can exploit them with Sauron's ability. And then we have Dictate of Erebos for 3 and 2 black. It has flash, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Then we have Ink Shield for 3, a white and a black. It's an instant. It says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. For each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white-black Inkling creature token with flying. This can protect us if we've lost any other protection that we have. And then we have Bolus's Citadel for 3 and 3 black. It's a legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library if you cast a spell this way. Pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And then you can tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, and each opponent loses 10 life. This is why we want to keep our life total high so that we can dig through our deck with this. Then we have Debtor's Knell for 4 and then 3 Orzhov. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And then Grave Betrayal for 5 and 2 black says whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Lord Sauron is merciless in the wars that he wages. and he has no care for wiping the board. So we play Path of Peril for 1 and 2 black. It has a cleave cost of 4, a white and a black, and it says destroy all creatures. And if you didn't pay the cleave cost, it's with mana value 2 or less. And then we have Divine Reckoning for 2 and 2 white. Each player chooses a creature they control and destroys the rest, and it has a flashback for 5 and 2 white. Then we have Doomscar for 3 and 2 white. It says destroy all creatures, and it has a foretell. For 2 mana, you can play it face down, and then you can flip it up for the foretell cost of 1 and 2 white. And then we have Promise of Loyalty for 4 and a white. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control for as long as they have a vow counter on them. Then we have Tragic Arrogance for 3 and 2 white. For each player, you choose from among the permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker. Then each player sacrifices all other non-land permanents they control. And then Feast of Succession for 4 and 2 black. All creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn, and you become the monarch. Then we have Merciless Eviction for 4, a white, and a black. You choose one, either exile all artifacts, all enchantments, all creatures, or all planeswalkers. And then we have Decree of Pain for 6 and 2 black. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated, and draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. Or you can cycle it for 3 and 2 black, drawing a card, and dealing -2/-2 to each creature until end of turn. These are the Nazgul in their human forms. We have Sir Conrad the Grim for 3 and 2 black. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And for 1 and a black, each player mills a card. Then we have Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts for 5, a white and a black. Has vigilance and protection from creatures. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, destroy that creature, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. And then we have Nil's Discipline Enforcer for 2 and a white. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls. Each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. And then Teysa, Orzhov Scion for 1, a white and a black. Sacrifice 3 white creatures, exile target creature. And then whenever another black creature you control dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And then we have Kumbal, Council of Allocations for 1, a white and a black. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Then we have Zachary Necromancer for 3 mana, 2 and a black. Whenever Zachary Necromancer or another human creature you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Then we have Pitiless Plunderer for 3 and a black. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token that can tap for mana. Then Grim Horospex for 2 and a black. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. And Zulaport Cutthroat for 1 and a black. Has whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. These are the Nazgul after Lord Sauron gifted them their rings of power. We have the Witch King for 5 and 3 black. With flying and trample, pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Then we have the Demon Lord Belzenlock. For 4 and 2 black, has flying and trample. When Demon Lord Belzenlock enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Then put that card into your hand. If if the card's converted mana cost is 4 or greater, repeat this process. Demon Lord Bells Unlocked deals 1 damage to you for each card put into your hand this way. Then we have Obnixilis the Fallen for 3 and 2 black. As landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target player lose 3 life. If you do, put 3 1/1 counters on Obnixilis the Fallen. Then we have Vargoth Bloodsky Sire for 2 and a black. It has Death Touch and Boast. For 1 and a black, target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts the card on top. Then we have Yahenni Undying Partisan for 2 and a black, has haste, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Yahenni, and you can sacrifice another creature to give Yahenni indestructible until end of turn. Then we have Torma the Desecrator. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. Then we have Anawan the Rune Sage for 3 and 2 black. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. Then we have the Harvester of Souls for 4 and 2 black. It has Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. Then we have Gaunty Lord of Luxury for 2 and 2 black. He has Death Touch, and when Gaunty Lord of Luxury enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile 1 of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of that library in a random order. You may look at and cast the card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as if it were mana of any type to cast that spell. The Mouth of Sauron comes out for 4 and a black. And for 2 and a tap, it can add black mana to your mana pool for each swamp you control. And then the Sling Gang Lieutenant will summon Mordor's army of orcs. When Sling Gang Lieutenant enters the battlefield for 3 and a black, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, and you can sacrifice a goblin, target player loses 1 life, and you gain a life. And then Basri's Lieutenant for 3 and a white will take the place of Sauron's Manish allies. It has Vigilance and Protection for multicolored. When Basri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. And whenever Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a 1/1 counter on it, create a 2/2 White Knight creature token with Vigilance. And then the Hammer of the Underworld Grond. For X and an X, it can be entered the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And when it dies, you put 1/1 colorless Thopter creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield for each 1/1 counter on it. And you can pay 1 and tap it to add a counter. Sauron's wrath is terrible, and his retribution will be swift. So we play Barren Glory for 4 and 2 white. It's an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no permanents other than Barren Glory and have no cards in hand, you win the game. And then we have Oblivion Ring for 2 and a white. When Oblivion Ring enters the battlefield, exile another target non-land permanent. And when Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Then we play Karavek's Spite for 3 black. It says, sacrifice all permanents, discard your hand, and target player loses 5 life. And that's an instant spell. So how we play this combo is we play Barren Glory, then exile it with Oblivion Ring. Then at the end step of our opponent's turn, right before it gets to our turn, we play Karavek's Spite, destroying the Oblivion Ring and everything else we own and discarding our hand, and then winning the game through Barren Glory. This deck can also achieve infinite mana in 2 ways. The first way is to utilize the Mouth of Sauron, along with either Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth or Blanket of Night and the Sword of Perun's. As long as you have 6 mana, you can tap and then untap indefinitely the Mouth of Sauron to create infinite black mana. The second way to get infinite mana in this deck is to utilize Sling Gang Lieutenant, Nim's Deathmantle, Ashnod's Altar, and the Pitiless Plunderer. The way this combo works is you have the Sling Gang Lieutenant, as well as the Pitiless Plunderer, the Nim's Deathmantle, and the Ashnod's Altar all on the battlefield at once. Then you sacrifice the Sling Gang Lieutenant as well as one of his tokens to the Ashnod's altar to then get it back with the Nim's Death Mantle and do that over and over again. This will net you a bunch of treasure tokens as well as an infinite army of goblins. And then we can play Cathar's Crusade along with Bosri's Lieutenant to gain an infinite army of knights as well. Another way that we can achieve infinite creatures in this deck is through Torma the Desecrator, Desecrated Tomb, and Grond, or Hangerback Walker, and Enduring Renewal. See, Enduring Renewal says for 2 and 2 white, play with your hand revealed, and if you would draw a card, reveal the top card of your library instead. If it's a creature card, put it into your graveyard, otherwise draw a card. And whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you return it to your hand. So how this combo works is you have Enduring Renewal on the battlefield, as well as Torma the Desecrator and Desecrated Tomb, and then you just infinitely loop the Hangerback Walker for 0 by not paying anything for his X cost. And that'll create an army of 2/2 black zombies, as well as an army of flying 1/1 bats that you can swing out with and end the game. And if one of our opponents is low enough on life, we can utilize Lord Sauron's ability with either the Grim Horospex or the Harvester of Souls and the Grond to draw as many cards as we need. And then we can get infinite creatures, infinite removal, and infinite mill, and infinite damage from these cards. With Zachary Necromancer, creating a 2/2 black zombie creature every time a human is destroyed, you pair that with Conspiracy, which makes everything a human, and then you use something like the Altar of Dementia to sacrifice it, and then that can either be the win, or you can get a win off of Sir Conrad, or Zulaport Cutthroat. Then we can do the same thing with Darkest Hour and Teysa Orzhov Scion. But this one works a little bit differently, because once we get 3 creatures, we can start sacrificing them to Teysa herself and just wiping the opponent's board of creatures, along with getting a bunch of damage and a bunch of mill if we have Altar of Dementia in play as well. Now that this deck is fully ran through, I can say that this is one of my most favorite decks. I've spent a lot of time on it. This is one of my own personal decks that I play regularly, and it has been a passion project of mine for a long time, which is why it's not related to a budget. The average price at the time of release of this video is between $478 and $598, depending on where you purchase from. I personally got all the cool looking cards in this deck, so mine's probably even a little bit more expensive. But like I said, I've done this over a long time. And then the stats for this deck, there's 16 ramps between things like the beautiful Soul Ring that AlexMan037 helped me with, or Smothering Tithe, and then we've got 6 tutors. Some of them are just one-time tutors, others are multiple-time tutors like Razaketh and Vargoth. Then we have 7 forms of card draw, some infinite, and then we've got a bunch of interaction at 15, and then 9 board wipes, and then 34 lands. Thank you for watching this crossover deck tech. If you liked this video, check out our other content on YouTube or TikTok. Your viewership means the multiverse to the crossover commander, and if you would like to become a part of this growing Terran reality, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to vote on the next pop culture character to crossover, check out our Patreon, where we have some awesome perks. If you have any ideas or complaints, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now that this portal's closing, see you next time.